Lizzie from LZSY, and today I'm going to talk about one of the TV shows that I binge watched over the holidays, because when you got 6 weeks off of school and you don't have to go into work, you binge watch a lot of Netflix. So I decided to try out Bates Motel. Now I'm only 4 seasons in, because they only have 4 seasons on Netflix, and I know the 5th is the final season, and I'm a bit up and down whether or not I'm actually going to finish it. There's some loose ends hanging at the end of series 4, but it does kind of feel like it had a conclusion in its own way, and I don't really need the rest of it filled in. But Bates Motel was a really weird up and down journey for me. It's got a lot of praise, and it's got quite good scores and reviews from critics online, and I was like, I don't get where some of these are coming from. Series 1 I absolutely hated. Absolutely hated Series 1. I didn't like any of the characters. I hated the fact that the first episode had quite a graphic rape scene in it, which was something that, you know, could have been warned about, maybe if I've actually read into it to make sure that thing. But it was a bit overwhelming for your very first episode of a TV show that I didn't think was going to include that right off the bat. I felt like it was more for shock value rather than to actually progress the storyline, especially where they go with the character of Norman's mum, Norma, and how much that plays into it. I'm like, you didn't need that horrific rape scene in the very first episode. I didn't like Norman, he was weird, but I suppose if he's the guy who's going to grow up into Norman Bates, then he would come across a bit weird. But he didn't come across weird in I'm going to eventually be a killer kind of way. He just was a bit gangly and uninteresting, and it had so many bizarre plot choices. The problem with Series 1 is it took me a while to work out when they were trying to set it, and obviously it's a prequel to a film that was made in the 60s, so I didn't know they were going to time period set it, but because of the state of the house and it looking identical, I'm like, oh, they are going to time date it. But then everyone had mobile phones and modern technology, so I'm like, so they're not dating it, they're just making it for a modern audience. That's fair enough, and eventually he's going to become Norman Bates and it's just going to be a retelling in our time. So trying to get your head around that, then sometimes it looking like it's older than the original, and then sometimes they'd whip out a mobile phone and you're just like, I can't tell what's going on. And then weird plot twists, it turns out that the house that they're living in used to be a Chinese brothel where they tortured Chinese women, and the reason he found this out is because one of the Chinese women had been drawing manga of her bondage torture. And I'm like, for a start, okay, I don't understand why there's weird bondage manga in the basement of this house, because as far as I know, China and Chinese culture has a very different art style and a very different relationship with comic books and art. So Chinese women wouldn't draw manga. I don't know what the equivalent is called. I know in Korea it's manhwa, but they don't have the same I mean, they've got comics and they've got their own art style. It wouldn't look like Japanese manga, but for some unknown reason it was really... And obviously if you're living in a torture sex dungeon, why would you be drawing manga of your experiences? It was really weird. And then it turns out the whole economy of this town is all based around the marijuana trade, and there's so much stuff about them working in the marijuana fields, and it's oh my goodness, it's so secret, no one must find out that we grow fields and fields of marijuana. I'm like, anyone driving through the countryside would see these plantations and all these, and I'm like, maybe because I'm British, I don't feel that pot is as terribly terrifying as if they were fields of cocaine plants. I'm not really up on my knowledge of what drugs come out of what plants and everything, but I'm just I just don't think them growing some pot is
this whole giant town conspiracy that everyone's involved in, and people are getting killed off to keep it on the hush when they're corrupted and it's what has any of this got to do with this kid turning into Norman Bates? Really, what has anything they got to do? And then Series 2 came along and I still wasn't invested, and I was half watching it, and then there was the subplot of it turns out that Norma as a child was being continuously raped by her brother, and I'm like, wow, so we're going to go with this woman got more raped, and then it turns out one of her sons is the product of that, and there's this incest storyline, and I'm like, well, that's pretty grim and dark, but I don't need to see it quite as often. And it's okay, so they're trying to get the fact that throughout her entire life, this woman has known nothing but male physical and sexual and emotional abuse, and that's why she's so protective of Norman. And I get that. There's other ways to show it, and she doesn't come across as likeable as well. She just comes across as like kind of needy and crazy, and she just doesn't come across as likeable. And it took ages. It wasn't until series 3 that I started really feeling a connection to her and how much she struggles, because by series 3 they finally start addressing the fact that there is something wrong with Norman. It takes ages for them to kind of like work out the blackouts, how he could be involved with murders, and then it got interesting. I have to admit that series 3 and 4 I was far more invested. They started cutting down some of the other random characters that turned up, Norman would sleep with, and they would have to go away for convoluted reasons, and like, oh no, I've fallen for this girl, oh no, she shot someone, bye, I'm back, we could run away together, no, I'm mad, I'm off, oh, I'm the kooky crazy girl. I was like, whatever happened to that character? Like the girl that he met, like making sets at the theatre, and he was like, don't ever come around ever again. She's like, oh no, but I know about your blackouts, I want to help you. Oh no, you've killed my father. Oh no, we're in this together. Never saw her ever again. I'm like, did I just miss something? I probably just missed something, because sometimes I was a bit like, I don't know what's going on in this show. It's weird because it had some really nice stylistic choices and some nice editing and some interesting use of score. The house was amazing. It was nice seeing how Norma as a character started developing, and how it's always interesting when a character you really, really hate and hate what they're doing with actually starts ticking over into someone you're invested and interested in. And I just hated Norman the whole way through it. But the more he got actual, like, the madness and the reasons for his killing, and the more the actor started portraying his mental state and his madness, the better he became. And it was like, actually, you're a very good actor. The way he pulls off that like dual personality of sometimes thinking he's his own mother because of the obsession, and the lengths he'll go to keep that obsessionate, like, relationship alive. So by series 4 I was really, I was invested, I was interested, and then obviously, giant spoilers now for what happens at the end of series 4, so if you're not as far as me, I don't normally put spoiler warnings on my videos because all I talk about is spoiler-filled stuff, but the big, obviously, series 4, at the end of series 4, Norma dies, and we find out how she dies, and how Norman gets hold of her body. And you just see him, his kind of like slow breakdown. And he doesn't break down, he just kind of shifts into that non-reality that he exists in to be able to continue. And I felt that's a good stopping point. I don't want to know what happens next and all the ties up with the loose ends, because I know what happens next. Next, he continues running the motel and murders some more people and eventually gets, like, caught. And it's just like, so I don't need another season. I feel like it's come to a natural end. If, like, for some reasons it turns out that series 5 has some essential information and is even better than series 4, then I'll watch it. But for now I feel like I've gone on my journey with this show. But I do feel like it started off with far too much, like, shock value and sexualisation of some of the female characters, rather than dealing with the relationships I wanted to see, and it took a long time to like Norma herself, and by the time you're invested in Norma, she has died, and I was like, it was so tragic. I'm like, no, I wasn't ready to lose her, which is probably actually a really good choice, because by the time you really like her, you feel for her, you want her to succeed, is the exact moment when it's all over for her. So it is worth checking out. It's a very up and down journey watching it, but I would say the later parts I really did enjoy a hell of a lot more than the beginning, because I hated series 1, but series 3 and definitely series 4 brought it all together to me and gave me the conclusion I wanted from a story about how Psycho came about. But for now, this is Lizzie signing off. You can get me at the LZSY Bates Motel Tumblr blog, and also at Lone Dreamer Yarrow on Twitter, but for now, bye!